Good afternoon to those who are on the East Coast, the Central Time Zone. Good morning to those on the West Coast. And to those of you who are joining us throughout the length and breadth of humanity on 5 continents, we have people that are calling in, watching this Zoom. We want to welcome you to the FIDF family for a very, very serious briefing and a very significant and powerful briefing. And we have 2 significant topics. The angels of the Jewish people, the angels of God, led by Dr. Yoel Har, are right now the first and the most extensive field hospital in the Ukraine. And we'll hear their story as they're taking care of innocent Ukrainians, of members of the population, how they're working both with the Ukrainian government and the Russian government to enable the hands of mercy, the hands of healing of the Jewish people, led by Dr. Yoel Har, what they're doing on the field, on the ground in the Ukraine. And the second topic is our national director, Major General Nadav Padan, is going to be addressing us on, unfortunately, a very challenging issue. 11 Israelis have been murdered in the last 8 days. In the response to prevent more and more innocents from being killed, the call up of over 14 battalions who are being sent into Judea and Samaria, over 1,000 additional soldiers who are being sent to the towns, villages, and cities throughout the length and breadth of Israel to defend our population, to make sure that people can go to the makolet, to the supermarket, that people can get on a bus, that they can go to a mall, go to school. What this is doing, what's involved in terms of the response to terrorism coming from ISIS, terrorism coming from Fatah, from Hamas, and other places. And we'll be hearing a strategic analysis and an up-to-date briefing from Major General Padan. But first, we are turning to the Ukraine. Mostitska, a part of Ukraine that we as Americans are not familiar with, will forever be known to Jews in Jewish history, is the place of mercy, the place of healing, led by Dr. Yoel Har, who is joining us today. Dr. Har, we can't thank you enough. We know you're not sleeping. We know what you and your team are going through, that you're taking the time to address us, the thousands who pray for you, who are behind you, who care about you, and are so proud of you, and so honored to be associated with you as you represent the Jewish world, the state of Israel, and the IDF. Welcome, Dr. Har.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you.
Dr. Har, if we could ask you to share with us a little bit about yourself, your personal story, your background, and if you could share with us why you are there where you are right now.
I was born in Israel 51 years ago as a member of a family that ran away from this area. Both my mom and my grandma from my parental side and even from my parental side was born here in this area. I served 26 years in the medical corps of the IDF from the battalion 8 station until the headquarters, and drafted by then the Surgeon General Professor Yitzhak Rice, now the CEO of Sheba Medical Center, to join him for his journey leading Sheba in the next decade. So for me, when the mission went to the air, it was obvious that I'm going to volunteer for this mission, and I'm going to lead this mission. When I called my mom and told her that I'm going to this mission to Ukraine, she told me, you know, I never stopped you to go wherever you need to go. You went to Africa, you went to Kosovo, you went to Nepal, to India. I never stopped you doing nothing in your army career. Right now, I'm asking you, do not go. Don't go. And she had, you know, if grandma was alive, she won't let you go. And I told her, you know, Mom, because of your request, I'm going there. Because of you. Because I know exactly what your family go through. I'm going to lead this mission. So therefore, I'm very proud to be in the head of the corps acting here on the ground of Ukraine. Yes, the same Ukraine that all of us suffered just 75 years ago, with the proud of ex-army men, proud Israeli, but most of all, a proud Jew. Coming here with the troopers, with the physicians, the nurses, the auxiliary services all over Israel, the best of what the Israeli health services can offer. Here to the land of Ukraine, to the city of Mostitska, treating people who just going on terrible suffer.
Dr. Har, our understanding is that the large majority of physicians, of nurses, of medical staff are fluent either in Russian or Ukrainian, because as we know, most people living in the Ukraine speak one of those two languages and many times speak both of those languages. So these are Israelis, people who have done military service, who have had the kind of situation where they're dealing with casualties in the field, who also speak Ukrainian and Russian. Can you elaborate for us?
Yeah, we understand from early, when the mission just started to roll, that the language barrier will be one of our challenges. From one side, the healthcare society in Israel is rich with ex-Russian and ex-Ukrainian people who immigrate to Israel. And it was actually very easy to ask them to volunteer. I must tell you, Steve, that the number of the people that we need to say to them no, wait for the second time, a lot of people were disappointed that we cannot, put them on the plane and coming with us. So the spirit of the volunteering in Israel, it's especially amongst medical staff, it's enormous. People still waiting to come and asking us to come all over the world. We try to elaborate and to cope with the situation. It's a small camp, and our resources are it's not big regarding housing and accommodation. But we need to. A few Israelis were disappointed that they cannot go.
Dr. Har, you must have coordinated with the Russian forces, with the Ukrainian forces, that giving them the proper latitude, longitude, that no one would strike a missile, strike a bomb in that area, that this is a humanitarian area. Could you elaborate upon that?
I think one of the things that the government of the State of Israel and Prime Minister explicitly is to coordinate with both sides and ensuring the safe of the force. Therefore, we fully coordinate with our colleagues in the Ukrainian side, but also in higher positions with the Russians. Let them know, not asking their permissions, let them know that we are here and we're going to stay here as a humanitarian mission. They get exactly the coordinate of the place, and we get the guarantees from both sides that nothing is going to happen to my team. But in addition, we cannot count, only ourselves. We brought with us security from Israel. We brought with us helmets and bulletproof vests just in case. And at any given time, we have here outside the camp buses that wait for us as evacuation cars if we need to go directly to the border. The border with Poland is not so far. It's about 15 kilometers from where are we right now. And yes, from time to time, we have sirens. And then we run to the shelter. But you need to understand that the sirens here in Ukraine are not as accurate as Israel. The size of the oblast, of the region that we are locating right now, is about 350 kilometers over 350 kilometers. So try to imagine that someone is sending missiles on Eilat, and a family in Kiryat Shmona need to go to the shelter. So this is the diameter. Yet the area is very polite, and the overall population is accepting us in a very open arm, and right now it's very safe.
Last week, I happened to be on the Polish side of the Ukrainian border. We were dealing with refugees coming out of the Ukraine, primarily women and children, primarily elderly. In the gratitude they had and the appreciation of the Jewish world through the JDC, through Israel, seeing Israeli flags, seeing kippot, seeing the Jewish signs, they were overwhelmed and very appreciative. If you could describe, you're in the Ukraine, you're in the heart of it. Look, the history of the Eastern Orthodox in the way that they've treated the Jews has not been a pretty history, and you alluded to that 75 years ago. But describe what's happening today, the men, the women, the children that you're taking care of, that you're healing, how they communicate with you, their sense of fondness, of estrangement, of wonderment, why the Jews have come back to heal them and take care of them. If you could elaborate, and if you have a chance to share some stories.
Absolutely, Steve. First, about the location of this medical camp, well, located just in front of a church. It's by accident, but it happened. We got up every morning, opened our eyes, going outside, and the first thing that we saw is a church. Actually, we have a huge cross in this school. But you know, when I asked the people, did you expect any nation to come and help you? They said, definitely, we knew that you will come. We knew that the Israelis and the Jewish people will be the first to be shown support in this land. Deep in our heart, in our guts, we knew that you will come. And I must tell you that they don't have enough words to gratitude, to say thanks, to bless us, to bless my sons, to bless my family, to bless every member of these delegations. They are very polite people, and they know how to say thank you. I saw during the almost 2 weeks that I'm here, people who are at the end of the encounter, going to the physician, hug him, shake his hand, showing some gratitude to what we are doing for them. You need to understand that this area, it's a very rural area. I will say very, very carefully, even neglected area regarding medical services. You see cases here of, in the state it will be malpractice for physicians to treat the way they treat people here. But you need to understand that this is the situation here. People are not getting treated for simple things, for high blood pressure, for diabetes, mostly because they cannot afford it. It costs a lot of money here, even to have a catheterization, even to buy the drugs. A few days ago, an old babushka got a bag with drugs from one of the nurses, and she said, I cannot take it. And the nurse said, why? It's yours. And she said, I'm sorry, I cannot offer. The amount of money that there is in this bag is equivalent to 1 year of my pension. I cannot pay it. And the nurse said, it's free of charge, babushka. It's for you. We are not going to charge you. We brought this medication for you. You may use it. It's free of charge. They cannot accept it. They get used to pay for every service that they can get from the government, and for them to see the flag of Israel and knowing that the Jews came to treat them, it's a big relief.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Just to share with all of us who are listening, some of our listeners are in California, Arizona, Florida, where it's nice weather. Even in New York today, it happens to be fairly seasonably warm. Dr. Har and his team, if you look at the way he's dressed, right now they're undergoing a freezing rain. I don't know if anyone who's listening can hear it in the background, the rain hitting the tent. But the reason he's dressed that way is it's not Miami Beach, it's not Beverly Hills, and it's not Scottsdale, Arizona in the Ukraine. But they're working day and night. And we couldn't be more proud of you, and we couldn't be more honored to be associated with you. Dr. Har, if we could go back to a small degree about you, the person, describe to us your training, your military training as a medical physician in the IDF, some of the things you went through, and how this prepared you for this day when you are impacting humanity.
It's a difficult question, which I hope I can deal and to share. But when I see this mission, until this mission to Ukraine, most of the delegations that Israel sent were army or military delegations. It was easier. It was, and even the civils didn't prepare themselves to such a delegation. This is the first time that the civilian system, not the military, is sent to such a mission. And for us, for my CEO at Sheba Medical Center, Professor Yitzhak Rice, who were the Secretary General of the IDF, and for me, I was his assistant. We go through, and for many my team members that also coming from the IDF in their background and had some experience in Nepal, in Haiti, in Italy. Even during COVID, we sent troopers to Italy. Even further to Africa and to India. You cannot take this mission and make it happen if you don't rely on military discipline. So first, being organized, being disciplined, putting this together, you cannot make it happen if it's not running almost like a military camp. Therefore, people is going to, spread aware. We have every morning, not a misdar, but we have every morning meeting. Exactly 7:45 sharp. Everyone needs to be there. We need to see that everyone is awake, is not sick. We debrief the people about the mission today. Then we have time to lunch, time to supper, time to wrap up in the end of the day. We have a war room, as you can see around me. This tent is served as our command center or war room. So I try to take only the good things from my army career and implement it in this mission, which is so crucial when you are taking 75 people on your shoulders and you promise to the prime minister to bring them safe back home. You can only act as an ex-military man. Otherwise, it won't work.
Dr. Har, we couldn't be more proud of you. We couldn't be more proud of your team in what you're doing.
I see that smiling, so probably you understand what I'm saying.
We've got, we know that you have 4 children. 2 of them are in the IDF right now. What a role model to their father. What do you say to your wife? You shared with us what you said to your mother. What do you say to your wife and children?
I think my wife knows me, and she knows my passion, my DNA. She knows my mom. She knows my grandma. She knows that I'm still, in a way, army man, because you cannot take the army outside of you, right, Nadav? And she's really Eshet Chayil. She's the Eshet Chayil of the story.
Before we ask Dr. Har another question, just to contextualize for all of us who may not know our Ukrainian Jewish history, you have to understand as Jews, we've suffered there terribly. The worst tragedy in the history of Ashkenazic Jewry until 1939 were the Chmielnitsky massacres, 1648, we refer to in Hebrews, Tach V'Tat, 1648, 1649. And although the Ukraine at that time was controlled by Poland, which is why a city like Lviv was referred to as Lvov, it was the Polish terms, the Jews really represented the magnates. There were about 1,800 Polish aristocratic families. They controlled the Ukraine. The Jews were the tax collectors. The Jews managed the inns, so they controlled all the liquor license, which was the most powerful thing to have in Ukraine at that time. And at least 30 to 40,000 Jews were murdered. And keep in mind, they didn't have machine guns. They didn't have weapons of mass destruction. That means were murdered by sword, by one bullet. Descriptions of the Dnieper River in the Ukraine being read near Nemirov. It was a terrible, terrible history. New York City became the largest metropolis or the largest location of Jews on earth. Where did they come from? When the Ukraine was controlled by Tsarist Russia, and there was something known as the Pale of Settlement, P-A-L-E. Jews were not allowed to live in St. Petersburg. They weren't allowed to live in Moscow unless they converted to Christianity to become Russian Orthodox. Where did the Jews live? They lived in Eastern Poland, in the Baltics, White Russia, but the largest block of Jews lived in the Ukraine. And what would the Russians do? The Tsars do? They would basically say, the police have 10 days vacation. They would announce it that there's a 10-day paid vacation. And that meant open season. It meant pogroms. And we lost hundreds, thousands of Jews over the period of those pogroms. And that's what ultimately led many of the population of the Ukraine to settle in New York. What happened? And during World War I, when you had many, many forces fighting in the Ukraine, Ukrainian nationals, you had the whites, you had the reds, you had Ukrainian nationals. Over 100,000 Jews were murdered between those different groups. And then, of course, tragically, with Operation Barbarossa, when Hitler broke the pact with Joseph Stalin, when he broke the von Ribbentrop-Molotov pact, where Molotov represented the communist Russia and von Ribbentrop represented the Nazi Party, represented Hitler. That was broken in June 22nd, 1941. The German forces came in. Einsatzgruppen D came in. And in the course of 6 months, we don't know the exact numbers, but we're assuming somewhere between 1.2 and 1.8 million people were murdered in 6 months. That's before there were any gas chambers, before anything. The famous French Catholic priest, Father Patrick Dubois, has spent 18 years going town to town, village to village in the Ukraine, finding the mass graves, interviewing people who today are in their 80s and 90s, who can tell the story when they were children of the slaughter of the Jews of their town. There are no survivors from these communities. We are all familiar with Babi Yar. We're familiar with the city of Kiev, where 33,400 Jews were taken out during the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah in September of 41. But that's one story. And for us, the Ukraine is very complicated. For us, the Ukraine leaves an incredibly challenging, difficult taste in our mouth as Jews. It's a bloody, tragic history. On the other hand, it's a history of great Jewish intellectual growth. It's a history of great spirituality. A new chapter is being written by Dr. Har and the 75 Israelis who are with him. They're writing a new chapter in Jewish Ukrainian history. And it's something that our grandchildren will study and will understand when they look at this location that was so crucial, so significant to so many Jews throughout the last 800 years of Jewish history. And in that sense, what you're doing, Dr. Har, what your team is doing, we can never, ever thank you enough. And we're incredibly grateful to your sacrifice and how you are rewriting the whole dialogue between Jews and Ukrainians for what hopefully will be a brighter future, as opposed to a very challenging past. Dr. Har, if you could share with us some of your goals and your team's goals working in the Ukraine, helping the population there.
So first, let me just say a few words regarding what you just said. We met the mayor of Mostitska, and she said that she has some Jewish roots in her family because her name is Miroslava Peltz. And she said, I knew that in this city of Mostiska, before the Holocaust, 4,000 Jews used to live. And we have a cemetery here. So I asked her, can you take me to see this cemetery? And she took me to see the cemetery. It's an empty field, no cemetery. One stone stands there. And in the top of the stone, written Zachor. And this stone demonstrates the only remain. It's new, but this field used to be the Jewish cemetery. We said Kaddish, and then suddenly, from one of the houses, an old guy came. His name is Marian. And he told us that his sister, which were older than him in 5 years, he's 77, told him a story that she saw in her eyes. That in one day, some army people, which she cannot describe at the same time, brought Jews to the end of the cemetery and shoot them, falling into a big hole. And he took us to see where it's the brotherhood grave, as we call it, Kever Achim. So yes, the ground of Ukraine is full with Jewish blood, but I think that the Jewish people now have a different role in the world. And if we can bring, as a representative of the great Jewish nation, as the State of Israel, as physicians and nurses, health workers, as human beings, something else to the world, especially to a place that's suffering right now, this is our role right now.
Dr. Har, that was extremely powerful, and thank you. We have one last question we'd like to ask you. We know, as a function of the population movement that was done first under Joseph Stalin, then under this continuing throughout the 70 years of the Soviet Union, we know that many of those living in the Ukraine are not Ukrainians. They're from other parts of the Soviet Union that were transplanted into the Ukraine. If you could share with us the population that you and your team are servicing, are they primarily Western Ukrainians, or are many of them Russians? Are they people from the Baltics, people from other parts of the former Soviet Union? Who exactly are the population and the people in the background of those who you're servicing?
So this city, Mostitska, and this area especially, is a very rural agricultural area. Most of the people here are genuine Ukrainian people for many, many generations. And even though the people that we are treating in our hospital are all over Ukraine, we have people from the Dnieper, which is about 2 days driving now. We had people from Kherson, we had people from Mariupol, we have people from Lviv and Kiev. The population of this city lived here for many, many generations.
So you're getting people from a 2-3 mile hour radius. They're coming from all over, even though the primary, it's locals, but your people, as word gets out from Lviv, from other cities, they're coming to you.
Yeah, we just received this afternoon ambulance bringing a wounded a guy from Kiev. They drove almost 48 hours just to get him. This is the situation. The traffic right now is very, very bad. Even ambulances, it's a long drive for them. It's 2 days.
Last question, supplies. I'm not referring to what's being provided to you, medical supplies from Israel. That obviously you and your team and is being sent and replenished from Israel. but the supply chain for the average Ukrainian right now, what's the situation like?
It's very poor. A few days ago, we ordered some medical devices that we are running out from agent in Kiev. Still, we are waiting. You need to understand that traffic is very, very bad. Trains are packed with people, so you cannot move merchandise from one place to the other. So you need to count, the people here need to count of what they are growing in their own backyard. The supermarkets that we visit are almost empty. So people here counting or on their reserve that they pre-prepared in their houses and what they can grow in their backyard. Right now it's the end of the winter. It's still cold, but it's the end of the winter, so they can use a lot of, mainly using potatoes and some other vegetables that they can store and use during the winter time. Most of the supermarkets are empty. The bakeries are still working here because, Ukraine is very rich with wheat. So find a bread or find a bakery, it's not a problem, but other materials are a little bit problematic.
Dr. Har, we look forward, the friends of the IDF, we look forward to bringing you to America, to meeting you in person, and where hundreds will be able to meet you, to hear the story and the role that you've played. And again, on behalf of all of us, right now, there, as well as those who are listening throughout the length and breadth of America, we have listeners who are supporters of the IDF, who are supporters of the Friends of the IDF, listening throughout the world. And you're an Or LaGoyim. To quote Isaiah, you're a light into the nations. And we're so proud and honored to be associated with you and your team. Thank you for everything you've done. And we only wish you, chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek, to continued success, healing the wounded, healing the sick, looking after the Ukrainian population that is suffering so bitterly and suffering so terribly. And you've come as an angel of God, representing Israel, representing the Jewish people, to look after them. Thank you very much.
Steve, thank you. And I would like to convey a message via you and via this broadcast. I want you and all the audience to know that we here in the cold Mostitska area feel the warmth of the Jewish people around the world supporting us. We got enormous emails, WhatsApps, telephone calls from all over the continents, from Jewish people around the world. And it's knowing that the great Jewish nation is standing behind us as Israelis, as human beings, as physicians and nurses, but as Jews, make us stronger. And the spirit of our troopers here from Shiva Medical Center and from the other hospitals that represent in this delegation is strong, is solid, and we will return home safely very, very soon. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you. To our listeners, when we initially set up this webcast, it was to interview and to learn from Dr. Har. But tragically, what's happened over the last 8 days, tragically, what's happened over the last couple of days in Israel is very shocking and very serious. And as a consequence of this, as all of you saw in the email that you received, 14 battalions have been sent into Yehuda and Shomron, into Judea and Samaria. Over 1,000 soldiers are being sent throughout the cities, the villages, and towns of Israel to help and to support the police, to literally prevent the loss of life, to prevent these acts of terror. And they've come from many different places. ISIS followers, Fatah followers, Hamas has championed this and encouraged their followers. To get an insight, to get an understanding, we are profoundly grateful to the National Director of the FIDF, Major General Nadav Padan, who's going to be sharing with us an insight. Just before we start to hear General Padan's analysis, we would like to share with all of you who are on this webcast, who are watching it live, who will be watching the recording, that as of today, we are getting requests. Literally thousands of soldiers are being taken from their bases, from their locales, being spread all over Judea, Samaria, the cities, towns, and villages. In terms of equipment, getting to them, talking whether it's hygiene equipment, other types of equipment, whether it's necessities, food necessities, we are being asked by the army. We've already committed this afternoon alone 180,000 shekel, and that's just the beginning. Those of you who go back to your email after the briefing, feel free to push the donate button. The donate button is going to this fund. We're not calling it an emergency fund, we're calling it an urgency fund. It's an urgency fund to help our young men and young women who are protecting Israel and protecting the Jewish world. And now we turn to Major General Nadav Padan.
Thank you, Steve. I'm trying to recover from Dr. Evan. It really filled my heart, really, to see him there. It's amazing. I want to share with you that Israel facing another wave of terror those days. Actually, the incitement started a few weeks before the Ramadan holiday of the Muslims. During every Ramadan, the IDF in Israel coordinate with the Palestinian Authority the movement of prayer from the cities of Judea and Samaria to Jerusalem back and forth every Friday morning, and we try to allow the Palestinians to celebrate this holiday as far as we can, to support them as far as we can. And even this year, the IDF made this kind of meeting with the leadership of the Palestinians, opened the door for them to visit Jerusalem, try to allow them to visit their family, and open most of the checkpoints as far as we could. Unfortunately, because of the context, because of the waves of war around the world, because of the summit at the Negev Desert that gathered the leader of the moderate country, the moderate Arab country together, and put a flag of normalization between Israel and our neighbor, terrorists and Muslim Brotherhood movement that sucked their power from instability and from hate, try to unstabilize the situation in Israel, taking advantage of the holiday, taking advantage of the fact that some radical Muslims see the holiday is the best way and the best noble thing, best noble period of time to sacrifice himself and do a suicide attack toward Israel. So the wave started with a lot of movement at the digital media and continued with 4 terror attacks during the last few days. It started with Beersheba attack, and then Hadera, and then Bnei Barak and Ramat Gan, and yesterday in Gush Etzion. We lost 11 people, and few other soldiers and civilians got wounded. As a lesson learned from the last wave of terror, the Minister of Defense and the IDF decided to launch an operation that called Break the Wave of Terror, if you will. And the idea is to break this wave of terror before it's developed and take us without both sides want it to another operation in Gaza or a huge operation in Judea and Samaria. What the IDF tried to do is to stabilize the situation of Israel by sending more than 1,000 soldiers to support the police and stabilize the situation inside the main cities of Israel, and with extending the forces in Judea and Samaria and along Gaza Strip, trying to break the cells of terror inside the cities before they're develop their plans and ready to launch their plan toward our cities. Yesterday evening, thousands of soldiers of the IDF launch operation all over Judea and Samaria, been able to arrest almost 40 activists, terrorist activists from ISIS organization, from Hamas, and from Islamic Jihad organization. Unfortunately, during one of the operations, the one unit that we all know, face kind of counterattack by terrorists, and they exchange fire, been able to kill the two terrorists that attacked them, and unfortunately one of the soldiers got wounded. He's stable and he's okay right now, thank God. But we're probably going to see this kind of operation running the next couple of weeks, trying to break, as I mentioned, cells of terror before they're ready to be launched toward Israel. The meaning of sending 40 or more than 40 battalions to extend the forces of Judea and Samaria in Gaza is that those thousands and thousands of soldiers are staying under the sky in temporary areas out of the base, waiting and helping the security routine. And probably, as Rabbi Stiglby already mentioned, they'll need our support. Not only physical support, you heard the meaning of spiritual support from Dr. Evan. They have to know that they have the back of the Jewish people, that somebody over the ocean cares about them. That's strengthen and extend and strengthen the spirit of the IDF and the soldier, and it's important to keep the spirit in the right place. So the FIDF mission right now is not only to support the physical need that already been sent to our organization, but support spirituality, the spirit of the soldier, and show them that we care and we are part of the same challenge to protect the mutual future of the Jewish people. Thank you, Steve.
Major General Padan, you mentioned that much of this is being generated by online, by internet, social networks. And this is, as opposed to being something which is structurally based, coming out of the leadership of a Hamas, of a Palestinian Islamic Jihad. A lot of these are one-offs, and then they're copycats. Could you describe, how do you respond to that? How do you stop that kind of a situation?
So this web is pretty close to the what we call single terrorist wave that we faced about 5 years ago, which started in the digital media, the social media, accelerated by the organization, by Hamas, that provide terms, stories, video that tell the story of the suffer of the lies of the suffer of the Palestinian people, and push young men and women to get outside and have friction with the IDF forces and with settlement and the main cities of Israel. We are trying to monitor what's going on in this dimension, the digital dimension, and try to verify and assume we're going to be faced the next challenge, the next terror attack. So right now, while we're speaking, hundreds of soldiers and Shin Bet men, the equivalent organization to the FBI, if you will, and policemen sit in front of a computer trying to gather information, try to figure out when going to be the next challenge, and sending the special forces unit to do pinpoint surgical operation. And I say pinpoint surgical operation because we're trying to deal with the terror without sabotaging, without destroying this celebrate of Ramadan for the moderate Palestinian that just want to live their life and pray. So what's happened now is two cornerstone of holding this operation. One is intelligence one that try to figure out through the digital dimension what will be the next challenge, and the other one is kind of special forces cornerstone that launch pinpoint surgical operation, try to break these cells of terror without unstabilize the whole situation.
Thank you. Before we ask the next question, just to share with everyone, Major General Padan right now is broadcasting from Admiral's Cove Country Club in Juniper. This was scheduled weeks ago to be a regular event. And then because of the breaking challenges that we're facing and the response by the IDF, Brian Sarin, who's our North Palm Beach chapter director, the members who have come to Admiral's Cove to meet General Padan for a briefing to discuss and learn about what we're doing for the members of the IDF and how we partner with the leadership of the IDF, they've interrupted their meeting in order that the Major General can address all of us who are really dismayed, who are hurting, who are praying across the globe because of what is happening right now in Israel. General Padan, I happen to be sitting in our world headquarters in Manhattan. You see the flags behind me in our office. You know, in New York, when Mayor Giuliani became the mayor, Rudy Giuliani became the mayor, one of the first things he did was he literally put what they called beat cops. He put a presence of police on the streets. And that lowered, there were other factors, but that was a major factor in lowering crime in New York City because there was a perceived presence. So the bad people couldn't necessarily get away with what they wanted to because they didn't have free reign. To a great degree, that's what's happening right now. There's a presence of putting 1,000 soldiers in addition to the police on the street in a visible place, putting a presence of these battalions that are going into Judea and Samaria. Could you share with us strategically, you had said before that the goal is without interfering in the lives of a regular Palestinian Muslim who wants to live their life, wants to work, wants to pray or fast during Ramadan, but at the same time being a deterrent, a security deterrent to save lives, to save Israeli lives. This methodology, has this been used before and how is it employed by Israel and by the IDF?
So I'll divide my answer to two, because at the center of Israel, at the main cities of Israel, we're kind of adopting Giuliani method. We're extending the forces inside our main city. As you mentioned, more than 1,000 soldiers been sent to support and extend the police forces around the cities of Israel. In Judea and Samaria, we act a little bit differently. We act from the other side, of the hill, if you will. We're trying not to change the view of Judea and Samaria and let the Palestinians celebrate the holiday. And in the other end, as I mentioned, we operate every night and sometimes during the day to break the cells of terror. And I must tell you that the Palestinians learn over the year to understand it pretty good. They understand that we can be everywhere whenever we want to be. Like we've been at the center of the old city of Jenin last night with the one unit, and in other cities with other units. So the message delivered to the other side, no doubt about it.
Major General Padan, in the 3+ years that you oversaw the center of the country, the Central Command, Pekud Merkaz, my understanding is that there were something like 4,000 incidents where your soldiers under your command had to respond. So that's happening every day. How is this different than what's happening every day in terms of ensuring peace, stability, and calm?
You know, when you're running an area, it's always about balances between trying to keep the daily routine of life, the civilian life going on, and fighting terror. And it's influence your decision making. You're taking different kind of risk in time of dealing with wave of terror than you are dealing with taking during a regular day. So it changed the balances, and in a way we're operating more freely, or the IDF operate more freely during the last couple of days. We do think that we avoided from doing during the Ramadan a few days ago. we are checking more carefully at the checkpoint that between the centers of Israel in the main cities of Israel and Judea and Samaria. Well, I didn't think that we avoid from doing before the wave of terror started. But again, it's always about balances. I guess that the headquarters of the Central Command and the division of Judea and Samaria are sitting 24/7 right now, making decision after decision about operation, about which cells we have to deal today, what is our priority, and how aggressive we're going to be in each operation. And it's kind of tailor-made, very carefully, very meticulously, accurately way of planning.
Major General Padan, if I could bring up, it's a sensitive question, but there's been a lot of articles that have come out in different newspapers, different websites today about this topic. Israel has gone out of its way that the security fence, the security barrier, should not be an iron wall that closes things off. And for that reason, there are areas where there are Palestinians who can get through different parts. It would make it very challenging to have soldiers every 20 meters on a security wall like this. And this security fence, security barrier has worked extremely, extremely well over the last 20 years. But people in the press are saying, well, it's not ironclad and people can get through. And it's this weaknesses or gaps in this that allow these people, whether it's to come as illegal workers, whether it's to do terrible acts in terms of security breaches, terrorism. Could you make a comment from your perspective in terms of these articles that are going around the web this morning?
I would say that they're based on a true story. Look, there is no obstacle that provide you 100% protect. And one of the first lessons learned that you learn in tactics is that obstacle cannot work without forces. And the forces cannot be everywhere. And it's always about balance and priority. We cannot, put soldier every meter along the border, along the fence between Judea and Samaria and the main cities of Israel. But we can do a lot better. And to the one that criticize us, I must say that they're partly right, and they push the idea to do better, and hopefully they're doing better every year. And I can tell you that over the year that I served, I did better and better every year. We're learning every year. We have more advanced sensor and intel ability, and we can be more accurate with our decision, and we can make decision about where and when to put our effort better than we used to 5-10 years ago. So I'm very optimistic about it. We're getting better and better. The challenge also changed from year to year, but as far as I understand it, our development is faster than the enemy, and every year we're providing better security. The security that provided by my predecessor were better than the security that I provided, and during my time I provided better security than the commander that were before me. So we're getting better and better and better. That's right. The defense is not 100% work, but it's over the last few years part of a very good system. We must remember that till this wave, the level of terror during the last few years was the lowest level of terror we faced over the last half a decade, over 20 years. So this is the real statistic. Although, when somebody got wounded, the statistic mean nothing. Personally, when someone wounded, nothing will explain our failure. And every terror attack is a failure of our system. But again, I'm very optimistic about it because we are researching it, we're learning, and we're getting better every year.
Major General Padan, could you comment, at a time like this, the support that the IDF, that the security services are getting, whether it's from the PA or within Israel, from certain Arab leadership where the problems are coming from. What happens at a time like this where there's intense security, there's intense seriousness because of the terrible loss of human life, the terrible murder of innocent Jews, Christians, and Muslims at the hand of these terrorists? Does the PA step up? Do the Arab communities where these people come from step up and work together with the IDF, work together with the security services, or that's not something you can necessarily rely upon?
I'll start with the end of your question. We rely on no one but ourselves. But we must see during the last wave that it's the first time over 10 years that the head of the Palestinian Authority, Abu Mazen, condemned the attack, condemned the terror wave. On the other end, we saw the mayor of Al-Fahim, the city of Al-Fahim, that supported the terrorists that came from his town and retired afterward. So there is different kind of leader around us. We're counting no one. We have coordination with the Palestinian Authority. We're trying to do together whatever we can. We extend our effort by them, but never rely on it. It's just a bonus to our main security effort that, as I mentioned, lay on the IDF and the Shirut Bitachon Kli Shabak and no one else.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being so clear about that to us. The last question we would like to ask you, and this is a very speculative question. If you could project to a week from now, where do you see this going? Where do you think things will be in a week from now?
I like to believe that the fact that the IDF and the MOD launched this operation early than it used to be launched over the last wave of terror, because of the lesson learned, as I mentioned, will be the right tool to break this wave before it developed to be complicated and threat the cities of Israel in different way. I mean, launching hundreds of rocket terror to our city. So I would like to believe that in the end of the Ramadan and even earlier, we'll be able to stabilize the ground. And once we'll stabilize the ground and the terror after terror attack, that actually spiritual the terrorists and convince them that it's the right time, will be ended the next few days. That's what I try to believe. As a military officer, it's not about assumptions and belief. So you can pray and believe in one hand, but you have to be ready. So the IDF believe it is in the right way, but in the other hand, there is planning and procedure that allow the IDF to be ready to extend the operation if it's needed. Hopefully it won't be needed. And even till a situation like we faced like May in Gaza.
General Padan, please correct me on what I'm going to say if there's anything wrong, but just for our viewers that are not sensitive or familiar with Ramadan, Ramadan is a lunar month. The Muslims, like the Jews, have a lunar calendar. It's 29 days in which adults fast through the day, break their fast at night. As you know, religious Muslims pray 5 times a day. Friday is their Shabbat. It's their day where they go to mosque, where they don't work. But during Ramadan, not only is there fasting each day, not only do they pray 5 times a day, but it's a much more intense, a much more serious focus. And it's usually a month very similar to what we have in Tishrei, which is a time of introspection, a time of sincerity, a time of thoughtfulness. Many of the imams can abuse and can manipulate the population, and very often set up the Jews as the enemies, Israel as the enemy, and arouse in the name of Allah, in the name of God, in the name of the prophecies of Muhammad, arouse their followers and their parishioners to do dastardly acts. And historically, throughout the history of Israel, Ramadan has been a very, very tenuous time each and every year. General Padan, If that is not an accurate portrayal, if you'd like to comment on that.
It's totally accurate. You have to understand that regular secular Palestinian that lives their life regular over the year, living under the same kind of different kind of narrative, different kind of spirit during the months. So the one that tell the story, the daily story of the situation today is the imam, the religious leadership, and a lot of them are part of the Muslim Brotherhood, and a lot of them use this opportunity to radicalize the situation in Judea and Samaria. So secular young men and women that regularly go to university or to work or living their regular life in these months are under different spiritual influence that sometimes force them to do evil things. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a complicated month from perspective of security.
General Padan, before we ask you if you would like to share any last words or any last thoughts, just to speak to our supporters. Again, we've already been asked today to be there, to be supporting with humanitarian needs, with welfare needs for these multiple battalions that are now going to be spending at least a significant amount of time in Judea, Samaria, not to mention the 1,000 soldiers that are leaving their bases that are being staffed throughout the villages, towns, and cities of Israel. There's 1,000 that have been placed there today. It may grow. We're asking you to help us. We've been asked specifically today for needs, and we've been let know that there are going to be needs that will be continuing throughout the course of this week and however long this takes. We appreciate anything you can do to support us, to support our soldiers who are putting themselves in harm's way to protect the lives of Jews, of Christians, and Muslims throughout the length and breadth of Israel. Major General Padan, if you would want to share any closing remarks.
Yeah, I just want to verify the situation right now for most of the soldier of the IDF a bit. You have to understand that the meaning of launching this kind of operation is thousands of soldiers that stop their training, stop their courses, stop their security routine procedures, and they're out there under the sky. There is no vacation. Probably the next weekend, during the next weekend, thousands of soldiers will do their Shabbat under the sky, on posts, on patrols, or other security routine. So there is no better time to show our support, to show our love, and to hug them and strengthen them, because as I'm mentioning again and again and again, you win wars not by equipment, not by F-35, but by spirit. You see what happened to the Russian military in Ukraine right now when the spirit is not in the right place. So let's spiritual our soldier, our young men and women that secure the state of Israel, and by that secure our mutual future as Jewish people. That's what happens.
Thank you. To all of us listening, we want to thank Dr. Yoel Har. We want to thank Major General Nadav Padan for not only a profound insights, but for contextualizing, giving us perspective, and giving us a charge as supporters of the supporters of the IDF, as we, the extended family and friends of these young men and young women. You look at Dr. Yoel Har. This is a man who's been out of the Army many years, but that training and that strength that he received in the Army at the age of 51, leaving a wife, 4 children, he's there representing our people in the Ukraine. And now we have over 1,000 young men and young women, and that's going to grow in our cities, towns, and villages, not to mention the thousands that are in Judea and Samaria. And the way that the way that Major General Nadav Padan portrayed what they're dealing with, the challenges, the seriousness, as what happened to that Duvdevan soldier last night. By the way, one of our supporters, a family from Los Angeles, the Prof family, was with Brigadier General, the leader of our Israel office, Brigadier General Yechiel Gozal. They were on the Palmachim Air Force Base. And in the middle, there was a rush and urgency. A helicopter took off. And they asked why. They said, we can't explain why. Well, that helicopter went into Judea and Samaria and medevaced that wounded soldier from Duvdevan to a hospital, to a military hospital, where he was given urgent care. And please God, he will have a recovery. Please God, he will live and survive. But this is very serious business. And we thank the Major General, and we thank Dr. Yoel Har for contextualizing, for giving us perspective and guiding us through this critical time. We will be continuing with further briefings as the situation evolves. Major General Padan, thank you very much.